The night was peaceful and covered in silence, and the subtle buzzing of the backdrop television provided a comfortable and familiar living room. The lamp's golden color swept across the glittering off the glass and plush cushions. Alina's bottle of wine lying on the side table reclined in her recliner and relished the uncommon peace at 61 times such as these were treasures calm, dependable, and she was released from the turmoil of her youth. Long acclimated to habitual rhythms, however, this evening would be different. The front door gave a little creak as it opened, allowing her nephew Ben to enter. Dragging her away from her it held a gentle aura that pervaded the space, although unquestionably, he wasn't the young child she neither the uncomfortable teen nor the babysitter who required guidance regarding school. At the age of 28, Ben had developed into a self-assured man having the maturity to emanated from him, but Elena perceived his smile still had a familiar quality. That childlike smile had always been endearing. It might make her heart melt, and tonight there was something odd about the way he grinned. "Ben, would you mind if I sat with you for a while?" questioned in a casual yet unique tone. Elena paused, then nodded, intimately. Pointing to the chair next to her as Ben slowly moved onto the couch, feeling the warmth of his body touched hers, creating a traces of heat that persisted, and she assured herself that she was innocent. Just a nothing is seen when the nephew sits next to his aunt. More, but a change in the atmosphere like a door that creaks silently. Inviting the unexpectedly, Elena sipped her wine. Wishing the liquid would suddenly become dull, her chest to flutter, but it only increased her awareness of the situation. She had been separated from such sentiments that she believed had been time had buried them, but here they were, rising to the surface in the manner that she was unsure on how to confront you, Ben. You've been silent recently. His voice was low and tinged with a type of affection that made Elena's pulse skip. I'm simply taking in the silence. Her response was milder than meant to imply that she was terrified of the delicate tension that had been developed between them. Ben grinned slowly. Intentional grin that appeared to convey unspoken meaning that lets you know he started bringing himself closer till his knee touched once more. I've been considering us. Lots of with a syllable hanging, Elena's breath caught. Heavy and eerie in the air, like though it held a reality that she wasn't ready to face. She looked at him, looking into his face for clarity, but all I could find was his eyes had that familiar naughty gleam. She now noticed a gleam in a different light. She muttered, "What do you mean?" voice trembling with fear and curiosity. Then, his eyes remained fixed on his hand. Drifted carelessly to the chair's arm. Fingers positioned so close together that their kindness was palpable to Elena. Without he leaned in a little, touching, and for a brief instant, it seemed as though the world had decreased to this room and the area around them. This instance, and the implicit relationship between them, you are well aware of what I mean, Aunt Elena, he whispered. Full of significance that we've always had even though we never did, haven't we? As they discussed it, Elena's heart pounded. Pounded a loud drum in her chest, wished to reject it in order to disregard his words as gibberish, but the reality was ingrained itself in her throat, unyielding, and without a doubt, there had always been something hidden, something unsaid in 2-second glances as well, long-lasting, transient touches somewhat more than essential. But I don't believe we ought to be having this discussion. She was able to, even when her remarks lacked conviction. Jen grinned subtly as she felt the internal conflict. Why doesn't he? Whispered, that we pretended for years. Nothing there. Perhaps it's time we ceased acting as though Elena had yelled for her to stop whatever it was. Stop this developing between them, yet her physique revealed her small inclination toward his direction as though lured by an unseen force that she has been for years responsible for fulfilling. Her role in everything is still in tidy, regulated lines. Ben is seated so close to the boundaries are blurred. And the lines became something she didn't notice how Ben's hand has gotten closer, lying on hers, and the contact caused a chill ran through Elena's body. Was cautious and mild, as though he were testing the water's perception of how far away it is now. Could expand before it breaks, but we are unable to. Although the words came in a whisper, Elena out as a request instead of a can't we complain and get Ben's eyes checked. Her offering is appealing rather than demanding. Anything that was exciting and frightening all at once, but it doesn't have to mean anything, simply be here for me. Elena closed her eyes now in an attempt to collect her jumbled thoughts, but the way his thumb feels the warmth of Venus' hand, her skin's tracing light circles made it was hard to think clearly because there was a hidden aspect of her that was neglected for so long to give up and release everything I don't know why they had hung on for so long. If I can do this, she said in a whisper. Shuddering beneath the strain of Ben drew closer to his breath and uncertainty. You don't have to feel warmth on her cheek. Make a decision, he whispered, and simply stay just with me right now, that's all. The room felt impossible, therefore, I'm asking little, as though the walls were waiting with their breath held to see what Alina opened her eyes to see what would happen next. And in that little instant, she noticed there's something in Ben's homosexuality, that there was affection that went beyond desire. Comprehension and a silent desire that reflected her independently without considering. Alina's hand closed tightly around his silence. Recognition of the unsaid relationship between them. It was a brief, sustained over time, was delicate and brief, but capable of bringing about change. Ben's smile was gentle and somewhat melancholy. As though he was aware that whatever occurred would change the trajectory of their lives forever, but for the time being, in peace, none of that. In the evening glow, these two were all that mattered. Intertwined souls in a time when neither none of them could have foreseen nor fought against, and in the silence of that space encircled by the burden of unspoken realities and unavoidable decisions, Ben and Alina sat together with the knowledge that life wouldn't be the same after this. Following the night breeze murmured amid the storm outside. Via the window that was slightly open, stirring the foliage and producing a soft symphony that stood in stark contrast to sharp as the tempest rages within me. The tiny space was softly illuminated by a yellow light, sketch of a small space. We are too close to clay for comfort. To act as though nothing was occurring, he extended his warm, powerful. I felt the sensation of fingers covering mine. Everlasting, and in that brief instant the outside world vanished, leaving only the now that we are both alone and confronting the reality. We had spent so much time trying to deny. You no longer needs to act like, he said while gently caressing the I know I've seen the way on the back of my hand. You see, I sensed what he was saying. Sliced through the mask I'd been wearing for so long. For years, I wished to refuse to push him away to preserve the delicate, we should not cross the distance between us. My heart was the only thing that could cross this border. My deepest emotions deceived me because I had disregarded the snatched looks for years. The unintentional contact and the manner in which every time he was close, my heart raced, and now his hand encircling mine, his eyes scorching so intensely that I was unable to maintain deceiving. I had trouble finding the right words for myself, yet he leaned a few inches closer to his face. All of my thoughts left my mind, and his presence surrounded me in every small way. Meaning-laden movement, a surge of heat rushed through me as I woke up. Suppressed need, a yearning I nearly forgotten existence, and his hand made a purposeful movement. Sending a chill down my arm as it slides. I closed my eyes and rubbed my flesh with I'm prepared to fight, but the effort was futile, and I took care of every barrier I had constructed over time fell apart between us. Was an unquestionable relationship, so overwhelming and real that it couldn't be fought. I can't get it out of my head. He pressed his lips to mine in a murmur, you. I felt his breath brush against my ear. Skin, whenever I see you, whenever I might just want to be close to you. His words encircled me more closely like a cozy blanket that banishes every indication of loneliness. His handcuff made my heart race. His fingertips gliding down my cheek, I leaned into his touch mindlessly. How much time had passed since how long has it been since it impacted me this way? Someone gave me the kind of look he had with eyes full with feelings I couldn't express. Life once more, as though awakening after a long reborn, sleep in a life I believed. You shouldn't say these things if you had lost. I muttered, but it was not very clear. Protest without conviction, we shouldn't, yet as I was speaking, I was aware that I didn't intend to be the force dragging us collectively was more powerful than any rationale or reasoning, and he was also aware of his darkened, his desire-filled eyes informed me he refused to stop. He had been waiting too long. I've been wanting this moment for a very long time. His lips hovered close to me as he whispered. Sufficiently near for me to sense their warmth before I had time to react, before I might imagine that his lips were gently pressed. Initially, the kiss was against mine. Reluctant, as though giving me an opportunity to withdraw, but I was unable to do so. The last time his lips met mine, the last bit of resistance vanished as I planted a kiss. Him back, giving in to my hunger. I was unaware that I had carried for so long. Years of kissing, and all of a sudden everything else vanished from the globe. Disappeared into the distance, leaving just the way our bodies feel. The heat between us came together flawlessly in the manner that his hand slid down my back, drawing me in. Seems as though every bit of self-control and desire that has accumulated throughout time left only raw and unfiltered after bursting free. Time seemed to be standing still. As though the night had stopped to provide us with his hands brought me closer at this time. Every motion is purposeful, as if art was fated that bodies would line up in this manner. Each breath and each heartbeat, each touch seemed to be a silent confirmation that this is what we were supposed to. There was only the present, no history, no future. Moment that is brimming with desire and passion. We were no longer able to ignore this relationship. Years of feigning all the obstacles, everything was left after everything we had constructed was between us. The indisputable fact was a strong affection, even if it came with the wind outside was still blowing late. However, it no longer feels like a warning. Like an embrace, a tacit acknowledgement that finally, we had discovered one another. There was a lot of rain outdoors that night. Pulsating sound against the windows, drowning out the sounds of the world outside. The storm appeared to reflect the turmoil inside of me, a whirlwind of feelings I had not given myself permission to feel for years. However, I was caught up in something I ought not to have desired. The air inside should not have been pursued. There was tension in the dimly lit room. That we both couldn't overlook, a gravity drawing us closer and closer to one another's orbit. His hands, which are warm and purposeful, moved slowly across my skin, exploring it. Was both familiar and unfamiliar. Thus every touch created a spark of desire that I believed I've long since turned my fingers to ash, as if they were possessed by their own volition, pulling him through his disheveled hair closer till anything was conveyed to him. My senses were flooded with darkness and soil. I cocked my head as his mouth moved down my feather soft, stroking my neck across my pulse, and when he discovered that sensitive area below my ear, a gasp escaped my lips without permission, and unquestionably, every rational aspect of me yelled that I knew this was wrong. It would have been preferable to leave earlier. There was no way back, but reasoning had no spend too much time in situations like these. As a prisoner of expectations, I had slaved to regulations that controlled every action. Those chains were in his arms when I took them. Seemed to go away with him, therefore, I desired to take off the burdensome mask of accountability. It had suffocated me for so long that I desired to feel alive once again, and didn't need to. The only person who could provide me with, when he drew back his gaze in quest of mine, was quiet but full of inquiries. His intense stare captured my attention. Did I want it to be this real? As much as he did, my heart was previously replied. My thoughts may take over, so I gave a little, almost imperceptible, but more truthful nod, more than I'd done in years. And that was the only proof I needed his lips to crash against mine. Once more eager, now demanding, and I fulfilled his passion with my own. The kiss became more intense. Passionate sharing of hunger and desire. Something was too long buried, so we moved in unison, our bodies coordinating as if this was our first time together, longing for every inch of our existence. My skin tingled when he touched me, and time stopped mattering in the outside world. Appeared to fall apart, leaving merely as two souls intertwined in a desperate to feel, to be, to exist outside. The storm grew more intense. In the distance, rumbling like the steady desire's drumbeat between his hands, discovered that my shirt's hem was slipping under the cloth to touch the exposed. I shivered beneath the skin, but not from the cold. However, given the ferocity of his feel, the faint trace of his fingers, patterns that shoot chills down my spine of excitement rushing through me, arched a quiet invitation into his. He muttered, "Pray for more," against my. His voice is harsh with longing, and I crave it. You didn't just hear the words, they were a promise, an admission, and the disintegration of all of the things that were not said when you were all together. There was. His voice had a quality that made my. It was the kind of yearning to quicken the pulse. Something went beyond physically. I searched for something more meaningful and deep. Into those unfathomable, limitless depths of his eyes, and realized that I wasn't only I was at the heart of his brief yearning. The world right now, the only thing that mattered, and I was completely undone by that insight. I let out a faint, quivering breath as I returned the whisper, There was a noticeable change between you and me. What I had said wasn't only an announcement that they were surrendering a decision to relinquish all that held me back. His hold on me became more firm. Slipping hands up my back with a fresh I'm being drawn closer by haste till I sensed that there was no more room between us. Strong physique of him beneath me, his skin was glowing with warmth, and it was as intoxicating as entering in the barn I wrapped. There was flame and raveling. I felt the sensation of my legs around his waist. Firm hold of his hands, while he led me, we moved fluidly onto his lap. Innate, as though we were two parts of the same hope that they will eventually discover one another, his lips came back together after a lifetime apart. To my own, and the kiss this time was distinct, more intense, and more desperate as despite our efforts to pour every concealed feeling is expressed in an unspoken word. It was a kiss in the gap between us that talked about regret, hope, and longing. Intertwined in a fierce and relentless embracing, the space surrounding us appeared to reduce the amount of electric air that is dense. Spark between his hands that buzzed wandered about my body with an possessiveness that made my heart race. Not only was it lust that sent shivers down my spine, but something uncooked, burning a fire that reluctant to go out. I sensed his breath on my skin once more, hot and crooked as he spoke my name, and every phrase of the prayer is packed with respect, and I had to get my hands tangled in his hair, bringing him closer as though I could erase the years by fusing our bodies together. Of separation and desire that had held us, every kiss and every touch felt like a returning something I had considered lost or rediscovered, the individual I utilized to come again and be the person I wanted to be. Outside, the storm raged on, lightning briefly illuminating the space, flashing explosions, but the actual storm was within us, a storm of feelings and desires that were beyond our control. And I didn't desire control at the time. I wanted him to change, and I wanted turmoil. His hand sliding my hips and beneath me, a cadence that seemed old and automatic, as though our IES was well aware of how to proceed even if our thoughts hadn't caught up, with his touch all over my skin and my spirit, and I delighted in the manner. I felt lively and wanted to be free, but even as our relationship became more intense, I had a gut feeling that this was brief, the external world would encroach. Ultimately, with all of its regulations and expectations requiring us to come back to the positions we had vacated, but for now, with him in this room, I was precisely pressed where I wanted to be. Forehead against his breaths, mixing in the tiny area that separates us. Don't stop, I pleaded in a whisper. Command not yet, and I didn't for once. Concerned for once, I was prepared to face the consequences. Risk all for him in order to benefit us. His slow, leisurely smile made me smile. My heart skipped a beat, and I returned the whisper. In the same instant as the storm, but never I knew it was crescendo outdoors. I knew for sure that I wasn't lost. No longer found him in us, and I would continue to feel that way for as long as I was able to, regardless of the dawn may come, since occasionally and in the middle of turmoil, you discover precisely what you've been looking for, everything. Along the tempest of feelings, when the rain pattered against the window merging in with the winds roaring, if we were writing a symphony for the narrative, we are writing only for the two of us. Main characters. The faint yellow light from the contours were highlighted by the desk lamp of his face, highlighting the depth of his eyes that regarded me as though I were the one enigma he ever desired to solve. It was more than a simple yearning, it was like two souls, a long-awaited union exploring the wilderness of at last. Their hearts are finding one another. The outside world might be in disarray, but everything in this moment dissolved into there were just the two of us in oblivion. Desire lost in the emotional dance. His fingertips barely touched my lips, quivering in the initial seconds, as when choosing whether or not to cross that subtle line, but after that, the touch turned into a soft, captivating kiss that captivates me into a tornado of feelings where appropriate as the past vanishes, so does wrong. And the future disappeared, leaving behind only his lips traced the fire of the moment. Leaving waves down my neck's curvature, tingling warmth spreading across my body, each like a whispered recollection, the kiss long-lasting buried desires that are wrapped in. I shuddered beneath his shadow in the dust of time. Each touch serves as a memory of feelings that I had repressed for far too long. He reached under my shirt with his fingertips, my exposed flesh causing a spike in feelings, like my body was waking up from a profound as I slept. My breathing grew labored, and my heart beat frantically, as though it longed to go from my chest and combine with his rhythm. I let forth a low groan when his fingers touched the delicate flesh. His response was just over my hip. As passionate as a kiss with a deeper trail, he paused as he ran scalding lines along my body. He drew his dark eyes back a little, latching into mine as though catching each and every information about this moment. "Are you certain?" His voice was a whisper, trapped between rationale and without thinking. I instinctively nodded, my breathless, but determined. "I've never been more sure." His hand was all he needed. Carefully lifted it from under my shirt, his fingertips gliding over my flesh as he took off my clothes one layer at a time, and at that moment, rather than being vulnerable, I felt strong due to his appearance. He looked at me with admiration, making I feel lovely, deserving of love, and love. "You're amazing," he muttered. As he dragged me, his voice was full of wonder. He pressed his lips to mine in a kiss. It carried the weight so slowly and deeply. Of all the feelings we had kept hidden, you moved with each other as you were buried. Purposeful and intentional, as even if each moment counted and neither one of us desired to release his hands. Wandered around freely, examining every nook and corner, each touch triggering afresh. I'm craving him even more because of the fire inside me. He probed me farther with such gentleness that it even shocked. I positioned myself to meet his. Each and every breathing difficulties as waves of feeling swept over me, like though I had entered an unwelcome storm. He grinned against my flesh as he fled. It being aware of the precise impact he made on his hands, moved lower, exploring me. Each inch with a gentle touch, creating, there is no way I could hide my. We dissolved into each other's ragged breathing. Other than the limits that separate us disappearing, leaving only a strong link bringing us nearer, and time seemed to stand still as it got closer. No more roaring wind and more rain outside. Just the feeling of his touch on his kisses, and the synchronized beat of our breaths. It seemed like the whole world had decreased to the two of us, and nothing was able to put out the fire. He paused for a second between us. His shadowy eyes met mine. In that look, I noticed that everyone wanted love. And an unspoken assurance that whatever transpired at this point would stay engraved in our hearts. We moved two parts of a forever again. Mystery that was longing to be discovered. Each other following years of straying in that accept all of our flaws. Appeared to heal as though love had the ability to mend all the wounds we had inside. It wasn't merely a celebration of both the body and the soul's oneness. Was a relationship that transcended whatever I believed I was capable of feeling, because every kiss and every touch seemed to not only was he caressing my skin, but extending into the most obscure areas of my soul. A night of temptation. Thus the wall clock ticked softly every second, as if to frozen in the poorly lighted space, where just the gentle illumination of the nightlight flashed and blended with the silence in the night air outside the window stretched in the dark for eternity. Only the whisper of leaves may break it. Softly rustling a melody in the breeze, blending in with the fast-paced beat of my. He stood there with his deep gaze and heartbeat, pulling me in and removing the final. My mental shields are still present in everything blurred around me as he approached. Every move is purposeful and requires a lot of pulling, transporting me to a different reality where only we were here, and the powerful attraction of it was difficult to satisfy desire. Resist. I was unaware of his drawing technique. So close that I could just feel his hand brushing sending shivers down my spine against my arm. His touch on the flesh wasn't merely physical. Was a lengthy, wordless declaration of feelings. He reclined in his warm embrace, buried between us. I felt a tremor as my breath touched my ear. "I've been wanting this for so long," he whispered in a hoarse voice. "For a long time." Confession that neither of us knew. Without, his hand moved to my waist as he spoke, bringing me nearer until I felt that his heart thumping against mine, every time pulse that resonates as urgently as a burst of warmth swept through me. The distance between us erases any lingering pause. Time seems to slow down as my hands inspected every inch of my body. Every touch causes me to shudder with I wished I could stop him from moving. Gradually, with each deliberate departure gesture, I'm out of breath and want more, but never. I want to hold on to this moment till it ends. He muttered, "On to every second of this." His voice mingled with mine against my neck. The night's shadows are both gentle and intense, so I pressed in closer to him, sensing each motion as even though this moment was a part of me. Wasn't limited to making physical touch, was an expression of appetites that had simmered below the surface for a very long time. He treasured every moment as though attempting to extend it into the future, combining each feeling to create the ideal, the symphony of feelings, and we were unable to control them. Everything suddenly exploded like the sound of waves breaking against the coast, removing all restrictions in that the instant the outer world vanished, only the two of us remaining enmeshed in the air storm. He put his arms around me with feelings delicate yet powerful, as though fearing that if when he let go, everything would turn into a brief dream. We moved in together. Precisely in time, as though we had been longing for each other our entire lives. It was more than I had ever experienced before. Thought that every action and touch was perfect, as though he were supposed to fit within the stress that had been in every part of me after brewing between us for a long time. It evaporated, transforming into an unadulterated, pure bliss that left both of us when it was over. We lay gasping. Our breaths mixed together and I laid my head down in the room's calm hum. Sitting on his chest and hearing the beat of his heart, sensing his warmth that feels comforting and gentle against me, promise in those words from the peaceful time were needless. Everything we had suppressed had been stated in the manner in which we interacted, in every look and in every panting. The time we spent together wasn't just the body's contentment, but a strong bond between the bond that had developed discreetly between us, and he gradually drew me in closer. His arms encircling me tightly, and I closed my eyes and made a secret vow, relishing the comfort and tranquility of resting in his arms. There was nothing to consider tomorrow, as I was aware of that from that point on, everything had changed. In the depths of that night, forever, we discovered one another, and from this moment forward nothing would ever stand in the way of progress. Us once more.